I first met UMB when I was at the crossroads of my business. I had a serious problem, and UMB has made it possible for me to still stand today. How did they do this? They did not work and put me in a box. They looked at me as an individual and got a product from me which helped me to survive the period. Banks should look at it and see how they can also go that way to be able to meet individual customers, tailor products to suit the individual customers, and not to just box everybody together.
Our next speaker, who is going to join us virtually, is the founder and executive chairman of AB and David Africa, a Pan-African business firm with offices in 6 countries in Africa and networking firms in 24 African countries as well. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome virtually our next speaker, Mr. David Ofuso-Dorte, executive chairman, AB and David Africa. Are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Good.
I hope you can see and hear me.
Sure, we can see and hear you very well.
Thank you for the invitation, and I bring you greetings from West Africa. I'm speaking from Accra at the moment. And I was listening to the minister. So in accordance with protocol, I hope that I am following the right protocol. Honorable Minister, the Chair, distinguished guests, and I think I've also seen the Honorable Deputy Speaker of Ghana's Parliament, a friend of mine and a senior at the bar. I'm happy to be speaking to this gathering at this time on the topic, creating Africa's future through entrepreneurial leadership, which is the topic I was giving. I tend to be quite unconventional when it comes to some of these things. So following from the unconventional minister who just spoke, probably is going to be something similar. And I share 99% of the thoughts that she shared. Now, talking about the future, and I'm not sharing slides, I want to speak from my heart on what I believe. Talking about the future, it's presupposes that we all desire some future. And for me as a person who has been quite active through an organization that I work with in my nightlife, my day life is the law firm that you mentioned, but in my nightlife, I'm a very active member of an organization called Afro Champions. And through Afro Champions, we were very, very active in the private sector participation in the formation of the AfCFTA. So I've been at the center, from behind the scenes, and I share the view of Africa's future. However, as an entrepreneur myself, I am not looking at 2063. I think 2063, even though it celebrates the 100th year of the AU now, or formerly OAU and now AU, from a business person's perspective, it tends to give a time frame that businessmen don't take into account when they are planning. Businessmen at most will do 5 or 10 years. It's not because they don't think long term, because businesses are there for perpetuity. But it's because in terms of looking at the future, businesses believe in acting now towards the future, and they tend to have a shorter time frame. And for most businesses in the private sector who have looked at Agenda 2063, we have been talking more about 2030. Not because we don't believe in 2063, but we think we need to do something now and not think that the future is very far away. Unfortunately, that's what happened to many African countries which created Agenda 2000 and subsequently Agenda 2020. And everybody thought 2020 was far away until it came with COVID. And we are now thinking about 2063. So the time frame I have in looking at the future relates more to 2030 than to 2063. But however, it thrives on certain beliefs. One of it is that the future can be created. you cannot talk about the future without believing that it can be created. Because if you don't believe it can be created, then it means you believe that the future should be waited for. And when you wait for it, then the circumstances that occur are not circumstances that you adequately prepared for. So I believe that the future can be created. And for entrepreneurial leadership, I encourage everybody to look at that future in that way. And therefore, much as we want to create 2063, if we believe that the future can be created, then we must recognize another point, which is that the future actually consists of a movement of now to now. The future is actually not tomorrow, but it is now. Now, the Honorable Minister started speaking about 10:15 Ugandan time, which was 7:15 Ghana time. Now, if my time is right, it should be about 11:35 Uganda time. In other words, at 10:15 Uganda time, 11 was in the future, but that future has already arrived. It just happens to be 1 hour in the future. By the time I finish speaking, another future will have passed, because the future is constantly occurring. And if you don't understand it that way, you will not be acting now because you think the future has to be waited for. And that's one of the problems with religion anyway. And I'm religious and a Christian, but I'm just drawing attention that we need to understand that the future is already occurring. The problems Africa has today, we do have them because we did not do anything about it yesterday. And if we don't do something about it today, we will have a tomorrow which is worse than today. I happen to be somebody who tweets a lot. I tweet almost every day, and I share some of these things through my tweets on a daily basis. So when we talk about creating the future through entrepreneurial leadership, I am not talking about a future that we are waiting for Agenda 2063 or Agenda 2030, but a future that we start working on today in order to make the tomorrow better. Because as I said, it consists of a movement of present to present, and the future is already occurring. So having laid that premise, it is important to also understand that every society reflects a certain number of things. And three things are very important when we come to talk about Africa. One, no society is greater than the collective thinking minds of its people. In other words, the mindset of the society itself reflects how the society is. And the Honorable Minister echoed that in one way or the other. The second thing that is important is that the society reflects the direction the leaders of the society took the society towards. In other words, if the leaders do not put the society in a particular direction, such as Agenda 2063, we will go in the wrong direction. Now, there is a third thing, which is that the society reflects all the work that we did together. And it is the work that we did together that together with leadership will create whatever the society finds itself in. So that will be part of the things that will form, as it were, some of the suggestions and some of the ways I look at it. Now, when you have a society whose collective mindset is short-term, and again, that's one of the things the minister also said, you find that we tend to look at present problems only in terms of its present solution, but without recognizing that the solution that we need to give to the present problem must also take care of where we want to arrive at tomorrow. Now, entrepreneurs don't think that way. Entrepreneurs tend to think in the reverse. However, we have a continent where, unfortunately, the entrepreneurs and politicians seem to think differently, and their thinking is not synchronized. Of course, there are a few exceptions, such as some of the things that the Honorable Minister talked about. But what happens is that when leadership consistently focus on the present, they create chaos for the future. And again, if Africa is in chaotic states, economically, socially, developmentally, it is because of short-term approach that we have taken over the period. Now, if you look at Africa and you look at the challenges of leadership, and by leadership this time, I'm talking about political leadership. I'm aware that leadership is not referring to only political leadership, and I'm going to talk about entrepreneurial leadership. But where political leadership appears to have consistently failed, it means that there is something that we have been doing wrong and something that we need to deal with if we have to succeed moving forward. And for me, there is nothing more important than understanding the fundamental things that are necessary in order for this to happen. And one of the fundamental things that we need to deal with is what it is that creates societies that succeed. One is leadership, and there's a lot of talk about leadership. I'm not going to repeat that. And when I mean leadership, I'm talking about political leadership, as I indicated. But where political leadership consistently fails, history shows that there must be a push from the middle. And by the middle, I'm talking about entrepreneurs, the elite, and persons who form the critical mass of the thinking of the society. And that push is necessary if the society is to develop, and leadership is not doing, and political leadership, I mean, is not doing what is expected. Now, if the middle does not push, what happens is that the masses revolt. And if the masses revolt and that revolution does not lead to the success or the attainment of what the society is looking for, you create a situation where we are left with only the last option. And that last option is very simple. It is that option where the development occurs, not as a result of what the masses did, but as a result of a coincidence of unintended actions. Now, what is meant by that? In other words, I'm saying societies develop through four ways. One is when leadership, or political leadership as it were, stimulates that development. The other one is when the middle class push the leadership to stimulate development. The third one is when the masses revolt, and as a result, it pushes both the middle class and the leadership to stimulate development. The last one is where you have unintended things just converging. You will notice, if you happen to be on any platform on WhatsApp or talk to people outside political leadership, you will find that we have developed a continent where there are two separate Africas. And again, in one of my tweets, I talked about the emergence of two separate Africas. The first Africa is the Africa which is often spoken in mainstream media, especially in the West, which consists of either the bad news of poverty, etc., or the bad news relating to political leaders, because political leaders are hobnobbing with other global political leaders. But the one which is not talked about is the fact that there is a bursting entrepreneurship, youth entrepreneurs, normal entrepreneurs of Africans collaborating and working across the continent and doing many, many wonderful things, including things like this series of events that is being organized by Human Capital here. On June 9th, 2022, in my tweet, I was talking about this, and I said that it appears to me that Africa is revealing a new phenomenon. And that phenomenon is a phenomenon we ought to study when it comes to leadership and development. It is a phenomenon which, in my view, reveals that a society has a fifth way of developing, which is that it can develop in spite of its leaders, not because of its leaders. In other words, if entrepreneurs and the middle class and other persons are doing so many right things, collaborating across the continent, I'm in Accra at the moment, and some people are in Kampala, Malawi. People are on this platform from all over the world, collaborating and working together. If that is happening, then it means that if we are at the same time complaining about leadership in Africa, it means we can have a situation where societies can develop in spite of its leaders, because we don't seem to believe that the leaders are doing the right thing or taking us in the right way. So, in other words, the middle class, entrepreneurs, and other persons have a significant leadership role when it comes to creating Africa's future. So having said that, I think that the way we can accelerate this, and I'm using accelerate because so far as I'm concerned, this is already happening. It's already happening. The minister just talked about electric cars in Uganda. It is one of the things I follow a lot. Now, if this is happening and the collaboration across Africa is happening, what we need to do is to accelerate it, because this is not new. And we accelerate it by creating that atmosphere and that system that enables us to be able to create that spiral that Africa needs in order to move to the next step. And that can only happen if it starts with a mindset change. And for me, we cannot create Africa's future through entrepreneurial leadership without starting with mindset change. I consider it as the most important. And there are certain mindsets that is extremely, extremely important that we need to deal with. The first is to do away with all the excuses we give ourselves. Now, the excuses, as we know, slave trade, colonialism, etc., it's talked about a lot. Again, I've had occasion to tweet that why is colonialism an excuse for Africa's development? China was once a colony of Japan. The US was a colony of the UK. And today, when you look at it, you may think that UK rather was a colony of the US. Canada was a colony of UK. Australia was a colony of UK. So why is colonialism, which ended 60 years ago, the problem? The problem is not colonialism. It is rather our disunity. And that if we united and changed our mindset and work together, Africa coming together and acting as one, actually, is more important than any amount of money we can borrow from anywhere in the world. And that mindset is important. I say so because if you have a continent of 1.3 billion people who are divided into small segments, the mindset of divisiveness is what enables the other people to exploit. And if you have not learned any lesson from how we got into slavery and how we got into colonialism, they all come from a disunity mindset. And we need to change that mindset. And it's part of the excuses if we continue wallowing in that mindset that we have some excuses, and there are many, many of them. Now, the second thing is that entrepreneurial mindset requires that we turn problems into opportunities and into businesses. And to do that, we must challenge the stereotypes and the problems. And it's important that we do that, which is why I say that in the new mindset that creates Africa's future, that mindset cannot consist of excuses, right? Now, one of the things we must realize that if you have an entrepreneurial mindset or an entrepreneurial leadership mindset, because you have the ability to turn problems into opportunities and solutions, the more the problems, the more the opportunity to be able to make money. Now, in a continent with so many problems, there's no reason for the continent to be poor, because we have so many problems that if we focused on creating entrepreneurs who solve those problems, it is out of solving those problems that they will make money. That's something that we really need to create a mindset towards, because problems itself are the basis for making money. It is because there's a problem of climate change. That is why Ugandan electric buses, as an example, is going to make much more money, because it is helping solve the problem of climate change. The more problems you see around you, the more there is a chance to create wealth and to develop the continent. So I find it difficult to understand why the continent is poor. The next point, the third, learn to reinvent. Again, you have a continent where people do things the same way they did it in the 16th century. Every society consists of people who are constantly seeking to have something better than what they had yesterday. And you cannot have something better if you are not reinventing the old ones. So if you stick to the old versions and the stereotypes, etc., then it makes the society stagnate. The problem with stagnation is that when you stagnate, you are actually retrogressing. And you are retrogressing because other societies will be moving forward, and the distance between you and others who are moving forward gets wider. So even though you appear to be stagnating, you are actually going backwards. And that's why it is important for us to constantly reinvent. To do that, we must do away with another stereotype mindset. Unfortunately, I've heard it repeated too many times by politicians, and it's one of the mindsets we need to destroy completely. It is that mindset that says we don't have capacity. I cannot understand when I hear that we don't have capacity. Which capacity are we looking for? And for how long are we not to have the capacity? The entrepreneurs we have around Africa built their capacity by doing what they believed will solve problems. And capacity comes out of experience. Experience is only experienced. If you don't experience it, you cannot experience it. It's when you do it that you make mistakes and you improve. And again, the minister talked about those who are working on the buses, and I'm using that to illustrate the fact that we allow ourselves to be talked down by this lack of capacity. Those who are doing the buses are constantly improving it. That means they are improving their capacity. When you tell yourself you don't have capacity, it leads to the lack of self-confidence, which is abundant in this continent. This continent has a lot of people who don't have confidence, including politicians, who, when they meet their fellows from other continents, quail, and they are unable to speak their mind because they lack confidence, because they have believed that they don't have capacity. Yet, these are the same people who sit in schools with other people at Harvard, Yale, all those Ivy League schools, and in local schools like Makerere University, University of Ghana, etc. And they beat everybody to it. And yet they can turn around and believe they don't have capacity. And they go and borrow money from other places for capacity building. And that capacity building we have been building for 60 years and we are still building. Yes, we will always build capacity, but we don't have to talk down ourselves of the lack of capacity. We do have the capacity. Whatever little capacity we have, all we need to do is to continuously improve it and not tell ourselves we don't have capacity, but we need to acquire some new capacity. We will never acquire it if we are always thinking we don't have capacity. It is important that we don't deepen our lack of self-confidence. We need to overcome it by just doing what we have to do and using our resources. And that's why this is quite important, a mindset change. Now, a lot of the mindset are stereotypes which prevent our entrepreneurs themselves from developing. Let me illustrate with a few examples. By November this year, the world will have 8 billion people. And we will be told that the largest population is 1.4 billion in China and 1.4 billion in India, both of which will be about 17%. But Africa will have 1.4 billion people too. But if you look at the list, the US will be ranked as the third largest population in the world. It's 300 million. Now, Africa will have 1.4 billion people, but will not be counted because we are fragmented over 55 countries, with each being small, 30 million, 40 million, 50 here. Nigeria, 180 million approximately. I mean, which of course is a country with the largest population. Yet, when it comes to bad things, when it comes to diseases, we will be talked about as Africa, as if Africa is one. When it comes to large population, we will be talked about in single countries, and we allow it. Because even though we have signed the AfCFTA, each country is too eager to enter into some agreements, some bilateral agreement with the West or the East, instead of entering into together. And Agenda 2063 itself requires that African countries act together. But I can tell you, Ghana has entered into a bilateral with the UK, Kenya has entered into a bilateral with the US, Mauritius has entered into a bilateral with India, on and on and on. Why can't Africa obey its own Agenda 2063 by acting together? Now, this is at the political level. When I come to the entrepreneurial level, I will talk about how entrepreneurs also ought to act together, because we cannot criticize our politicians if we ourselves are divided the same way our politicians are divided. Now, if we came together, we will realize that certain myths ought to be busted. One example is that Africa is overpopulated. When I hear very educated people talk about Africa's overpopulation, I cannot understand how they think so. Now, Africa has 30 million square miles, and we are the least densely populated in the world. Now, overpopulation is referred to as where the density is bigger than the size of the people who have to be there. But it has been craftily or well created in such a way that overpopulation is now linked to poverty. And therefore, it is not a question of density, but poverty. Now, Africa has 30 million square miles, 1.4 billion people. China has 9 million square miles. In other words, China is about a third of Africa's size with the same population. How is China not overpopulated, but Africa is overpopulated? It's a question of a mindset and what you believe. Now, the moment you move from overpopulation to poverty, we are made to believe Africa is poor. How is poverty defined? Poverty is defined as when you earn less than $2 a day. That's the definition of poverty. Now, take an African who lives in Entebbe or in a village near Entebbe, who owns the land he lives on, 10 acres of family land, who needs to borrow no money, who grows the plantain and the cocoyam or anything that he needs to grow, who owns the land and the building that he lives in. If you value all that, that is definitely more than $2 a day. But if you compare it to a person who lives in America or UK, who does not actually have the $2 but has taken credit card, and because of the credit card, he has borrowed against the $2 a day, he is rich. The African who does not need to borrow is poor. And we accept that classification. And accepting that classification then is added to the population size, and then we are supposed to be overpopulated and poor. And our leaders and our entrepreneurs believe that. What does that mean to an entrepreneur leader? It means that we stop seeing 1.4 or 1.3 billion people as a large market, and we call it a poor market and fragment it. Whilst China's 1.4 billion people is a large market and attracts FDIs, and then it is added to a belief that democracy is what we need in order to attract investments. China is not a multi-party democracy country. For the past 3 years and consistently this year, China attracts more FDIs than America, which has multi-party democracy. So since when has multi-party democracy defined FDIs? FDIs and investments is driven by market size, not by democracy. And if you let your mindset believe that democracy drives FDIs, you will be doing democracy. And I believe in democracy, I believe in multi-party democracy, but it is not the driver of FDIs. And it is that mindset I want us to change. The driver of FDIs is a large market, which is why I am 1,000% for AfCFTA. But I don't believe just in AfCFTA Agenda 2063. I believe in collaboration among entrepreneurs and politicians acting together so that our 1.3 billion is a large market, which is not overpopulated. That is what I'm talking about.
Welcome aboard the safest airline in Africa. With industry-leading safety measures to protect your well-being. The first in Africa to earn a diamond standard of safety. Offering a more contactless, safe, and seamless experience. Delivered with a smile by Africa's first fully vaccinated crew. Creating special memories that bring the joy back to flying, so you can continue making memories with your loved ones. Book your flight with Rwandair today. Rwandair, the safest airline in Africa.
Rwandair, fly the dream of Africa.
So we pick travelers, our typical customers are people flying in and out of the country. So we pick those from the airport wherever they're going and back, and we do this through a network of driver partners for whom we give regular business and improve livelihoods. They can book through WhatsApp They can call us, they can email us. We just try to make it as simple and convenient, as seamless as possible for our customers.